Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're taking a bit of a step back from the crazy daily headlines of the US-Iran conflict, and we're going to look at it through a really unexpected lens. We're talking about a 19th century Prussian military theorist. I know, it sounds a little out there, right? But as you'll see, this historical framework actually offers incredibly sharp insights into modern strategy and the very real day-to-day challenges of military intervention. You know, when most people hear the name Karl von Clausewitz, they usually think of a historian who just catalogs the enduring features of war. Things like the fog of war, friction, or that famous idea that war is just politics by other means. But as our source material by Andrew Latham points out, that conventional reading kind of misses the mark for this specific conflict. Clausewitz isn't just a cataloger here. Latham argues he's most useful as a diagnostician of failure. His deepest insights actually provide a framework that shows us exactly why Washington struggles to finish what it starts. Okay, let's dive into this. Think of this as our diagnostic checklist. We're going to evaluate how means overtake ends, the search for the true target, the danger of pushing way too far, and finally, the unresolved political equation that sits at the center of it all. All right, symptom number 1, inverting means and ends. Let's see how campaigns can sometimes run away with the goals. So Clausewitz issued a massive warning about this exact dynamic. It is incredibly dangerous when the pure operational logic of the military, chasing tactical successes, blowing things up, when that gradually overtakes the actual political goal. Tactical success is very real, sure, but without a clear policy and a defined, terminal condition, a war doesn't actually end. It literally just hits the pause button. And honestly, the shifting goals of Washington brilliantly illustrate this problem. The goals seem to track only what the military can plausibly achieve in the moment, rather than what the policy actually requires to succeed. I mean, one day the goal is to degrade and deter, the next week it's restoring freedom of navigation, or maybe it's preventing a nuclear breakout. The operational record might look super impressive on paper, but this revolving door of objectives proves one thing for sure. A terminal condition just hasn't been defined clearly enough for anyone to know when the conflict is actually over. Let's move on to our next section, the search for the true target, which leads directly to strategic exhaustion. Okay, so Clausewitz had this core concept called the Schwerpunkt, or the center of gravity. Think of it like a giant puzzle, and this piece is the central hub of all power. If you disrupt it, the entire structure collapses. Attack it correctly, and everything gives way. But if you miss it, you just exhaust yourself hitting the periphery while the enemy's core survives totally intact. The current conflict has really exposed a sustained failure to identify, or frankly, even agree upon, what Iran's actual center of gravity is. So let's test some of those assumptions. Is the center of gravity the nuclear program? Well, if we assume that's the true hub of power, then sustained U.S. pressure on their enrichment infrastructure should have produced a revised political posture from Tehran. But objectively speaking, based on the real-world results, it hasn't. Okay, what about the IRGC? If the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is the true center of gravity, then degrading its command and logistics network should have crippled Iran's capacity for regional coercion. Yet, as our source notes, their proxy architecture is still fully functional out there. Right, so what if it's the regime's domestic legitimacy? If that were the center, combining military punishment with intense economic pressure should have sparked a massive internal fracture. But Tehran is still standing. That anticipated internal collapse just hasn't materialized. Now, what's really fascinating is when you step back and look at all these competing assumptions together. Because there is absolutely no cohesive agreement on the true target, American actions are entirely scattered. A strategy that is built on totally competing assumptions about the center of gravity doesn't concentrate your force, it disperses it. Clausewitz spent a ton of energy warning against exactly this kind of dispersion. But looking at the strategic map today, it seems that warning largely went unheeded. Moving right along to our next diagnostic tool. And this is one that's conspicuously absent from a lot of modern talk, the culminating point, or pushing too far. Think of this as the ultimate tipping point of an offensive operation. The culminating point is that exact, specific moment where continuing to advance actually weakens the attacker faster than the defender. You push past this point, and suddenly supply lines are overextended, forces are exhausted, domestic will starts to erode, and alliances start to fray. If an attacker ignores this, the whole operational trajectory literally flips, and the defender actually starts getting relatively stronger. And applying this to the current conflict, we are seeing some classic signs.
On the attacker side, you've got strained U.S. magazines for precision munitions, Gulf partner basing access that becomes highly contingent with every single escalation, and a fairly finite domestic appetite for a forever campaign. Meanwhile, Iran is demonstrating Clausewitz's old rule perfectly. A weaker power can win politically simply by not losing militarily. For them, endurance itself is a strategy. Just surviving is its own form of victory.
Now, to be totally fair to modern strategists, we do have to acknowledge the limits of applying a 19th century diagnostic tool today. Let's look at some modern blind spots. I mean, let's be real. Clausewitz built this framework for Napoleonic armies lining up in muddy fields. He definitely didn't foresee the wild complexities of global shipping insurance, or sudden energy market shocks, or the deep, modern anxieties of allies in Riyadh and Tel Aviv. His take on deterrence theory is underdeveloped, and his thoughts on proxy warfare are pretty thin. But here's the thing. The fact that his theories are strained by all these modern elements actually makes the core things he did get right even more striking. Which brings us to our final section, and the ultimate diagnosis of what military force is actually for: the unresolved political equation. So, if there is one absolutely crucial takeaway here, it's this: destroying enemy forces is a means, not an end. It is never an end in itself. Under this framework, destruction is strictly a mechanism to achieve a political object. The value of blowing something up depends entirely, 100%, on whether it actually advances a specific political goal. Which leaves us with this final, pretty provocative thought. Can tactical hits ever truly translate into a durable political outcome? By Clausewitz's measure, the results of this conflict remain genuinely unresolved. Washington has absolutely proven it can hit hard. But hitting hard and successfully turning that into a durable, resolved political outcome, those are two completely different problems. It's just a fascinating lens to view this whole conflict through, and a great reminder that until the political equation is solved, tactical success just keeps resetting the board without ever actually ending the game. Definitely something to chew on the next time you're reading the news. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.